Hey guys, welcome to Turn2. I am Doa, and today we have a little bit of a special episode. Artosis is in Germany doing the Seat Story Cup right now. That's why this is being broadcast a little bit later, but it's okay. I think you'll enjoy it anyway. We've got a very cool episode today. Of course, the new season, Beta Season 4, just began. And on that topic, we've got two members of Don't Kick My Robot here to talk about efficient laddering. How can you get to Legendary the fastest way possible, the most efficient way possible? So let's take a look, or not, maybe take a look at our guests. You can already see them, I guess, but let's introduce our guests. So first of all, Dtwo in Japan right now, actually. We're in the same time zone, or near the same time zone. Maybe like one off, right?
Nope, exactly the same time.
Exactly the same. Okay, cool. So how's it going?
Doing great. Glad to be on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm feeling great. It's actually, well, the weather's really bad in Seoul, but at least all the pollution from China like blew away this week. So
No, it got really cold in Japan again. It made me really sad.
I thought winter was over, right? But
I know. There's no spring this year. It just goes straight to summer.
I'm glad you're like sharing some of this like weather pain with me at least. Somebody knows how I feel. But Alchemixt, where are you right now actually? Is the weather good where you are?
It's cold here. I'm in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. All right. So all of us are kind of fighting winter a little bit. But Alchemixt, aside from the weather, how you doing, man?
I'm doing quite well.
Awesome. Cool. So efficient laddering. That's going to be the topic for today. And so basically, what I want to talk about is kind of the decks that people should be looking at in terms of doing really well on the ladder right now. And of course, all these are kind of assuming that you are a good player, you're making the right decisions in games and things like that, because anyone who's familiar with TCGs, or, maybe even if you're not, if this is like a new experience, a card game thing for you, if you can have the best deck in the world, and if you don't know how to play it, you're not going to win with it, So talking about these decks are not going to guarantee you get to Legendary or even guarantee that you do well. You still have to make the right decisions in games, but these decks will probably give you the best chance to do that, I think. So I think, firstly, what we should probably do is just kind of go around and talk about what decks we're playing on the ladder right now, and why we think those are efficient laddering decks. And so let's start with Alchemixt, who recently you guys saw on the IR3 King of the Hill as well, kind of pawning noobs with the Priest 4-0. That was pretty cool. So what are you playing on the ladder right now? Are you playing Priest?
No, I'm not playing Priest.
I'm shocked.
I think Priest is decent for like a tournament deck, but on the ladder you can just get run over by some of the hyper aggressive decks, and on top of that, the games are so long. It's just slow. Even if you win, it's just slow. But I've been playing a lot of Hunter, Warlock, and Warrior Control.
Okay. And now for Hunter, I assume that's kind of like the very aggro Hunter, or are you playing some of the mid range?
It's aggro. I don't play the Bluegill Warriors, but other than that, it's pretty standard. Like nothing really new about it.
Okay. Interesting. So not the Beast variation with Houndmaster or anything like that. Just straight up aggro to the face.
I've actually never tried that version.
Okay. It's a little bit slower. I don't think it's quite as good. Not quite as efficient, too. So for Warlock, you and I were talking about this a little bit before the show. You kind of switch back and forth between the kind of aggro mid-range and then the handlock styles, because both are pretty good. And it's surprising how fast handlock can win a game as well, which, we're talking about efficient laddering, you want to do fast decks. So handlock is one of those control decks that can kind of fit into that category a little bit.
Yeah, even if you think it's a it is a control deck, and some games can go pretty slow, but usually I find that once you get a giant out, you really only need to hit them like once, and then they're already in range of possibly just dying from there's a lot of combination of cards, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So D2, what are you playing on the ladder right now?
I was playing like a variation of one of Strateco's decks. Basically like the Watcher Druid.
Okay.
Like last season, I got to Legendary using one of the quicker Watcher Druid decks. And then recently, I've been running Shaman. And it's like just making sure that like I can kill all the aggro decks out there, and be able to burst them down and stop their early game, stuff like that.
There's a huge amount of aggro decks right now, and the thing we're seeing, and I know we were talking about this a little bit before the show again, but like about how to sort of fine tune some of those control decks to maybe move a little bit away from tournament style deck to more of like a ladder style deck when you're going to be facing a wide variety of things, very very in quick succession, and you need something against more of the hyper aggro, more against the Murlocs, the hyper aggro hunters. Even you still every once in a while see that hyper aggro paladin too, but that's kind of falling off a little bit. It was never like the best deck, but it's still out there and still something that people need to be concerned about. I've been playing a lot of. I've been the aggro guy. I've been playing a lot of Murloc right now. I've got like a almost 100% gold Murloc deck I've been running on the ladder. It's about as close as I can get to. Apparently, like to get Murloc Raider, you need to be level 50 as Priest to get the gold one, and I don't think that's ever going to happen
Good
for me.
luck.
So, well, I know, yeah, I'm probably not going to ever have a complete gold Murloc deck, but I'll get close anyway. So, been running that, been running a little bit of mid-range Warlock because it's kind of fun, and then Control Warrior, which is my favorite deck to play in the game. So, let's talk a little bit about how we go about tuning some of those control decks to work better on the ladder, to be maybe a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficient. Because, I mean, I feel like there's not a whole lot to be said about the aggro decks. I mean, the lists are out there. You pretty much just make them and play them. There's not a lot of adjustment that needs to be done against other aggro decks or against other control decks for that matter, because you basically just go for the face and you kind of race them, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But for control decks, there are some changes that kind of need to be made. So let's just kind of go around again and then like give examples of like little tweaks that have been made to some of the control decks to maybe work a little bit better on ladder. I guess I'll go first with my Control Warrior deck. I was running a little bit beefier cards. I was running a couple of Yetis. I had some Sentient Shield Masters, which kind of go in and out, and I think those are okay against aggro too, but I've been leaning more back towards some of the earlier stuff. So the Cruel Taskmasters are back in again. Cleave, which is a card that I actually don't like very much. I have one in there again. And also Baron Geddon instead of Ysera. Those are kind of the changes I've made, and I'm assuming those are kind of similar to some of the changes that you guys have been making too. But let's go in the direction of Dtwo first this time. What tweaks have you been making on some of the control decks? I'm like losing the ability to speak. It's like 11 p.m. and it's going. But
It's the same time here, so I know what you're talking about.
yeah.
I was gonna make a comment about how like you're running aggro.
Yeah,
and
mostly,
a lot of times, like I was talking to some teammates, and I was just saying that a lot of times the best counter to aggro is just like better aggro. Like if you feel like you're the better player, because a lot of times when you're playing control deck against an aggro deck, like you feel like it's out of your control. It's like if I get the good card, I get good cards, I win. If I don't, I lose. But if you're playing aggro against aggro and you're both getting like the same kind of decent draws, and if you could just play it better, then that gives you a pretty good chance of winning. But as far as like the changes that I put in my deck, like I just made sure that my shaman deck in particular, like I can burst them down really really quickly. Like I put a Wind Speaker in there, I put Leroy Jenkins in there, I put a Bloodlust in there. The reason I put Wind Speaker, not what's the other one? Wind Fury.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. That's really interesting.
The reason I put Wind Speaker is because I have Bloodlust in there, and it's really bad to have 2 dead cards in your hand. But yeah, because I'll play like hunters, and then I'll just burst them down. They'll be like at 20, I'll just burst them down, and they don't realize it. Like they're trying to set up for the kill, and I just kill them first. So that's one of the ways I've done it.
Okay, interesting. Alchemixt, what have you been doing with your decks lately?
Well, I did a lot of the same stuff that you mentioned with Warrior Control. Like I added a Sunwalker, Sentient Shield Master, Cleave. But also in my Hunter deck, I run a Flare and an Acidic Swamp Ooze, which is kind of more like a tournament style deck. But I kept it the same on the ladder because basically the cards are never dead.
Yeah.
Like Flare replaces itself, Swamp Ooze, it's not great, but you can always just throw it out there. So you kind of get the edge in like the other aggressive matchups. Like you have the edge in the mirror match, and then I feel like you have a good matchup against the Warlock decks because you have Explosive Trap, Unleash the Hounds.
Right. Okay.
Trying to think. And yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing. And then my Warlock aggro deck there's really nothing fine tuned about it against other aggro. It's just kind of like what Dtwo was talking about. I just hope that I can we get similar draws and I can maybe outplay them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do feel like that is one really kind of strong thing about running aggro on the ladder, and that's actually one of the reasons why I enjoy running aggro on the ladder is because I feel like I can out trade them. You know, I can like force them into unfavorable decisions too. And aggro versus aggro used to be something that just frustrated me, but lately I've been really, really enjoying it because you can kind of change around the order in which you play some cards now if you're doing that aggro mirror match to kind of like bait them into various things too. So there's like a lot of really subtle stuff right now going on with aggro versus aggro that if you kind of pay attention to it, I feel like you can increase your win rate a little bit more than kind of like the coin flip that people sort of make it out to be right now on ladder.
Yeah, like for instance, like the Warlock aggro deck that everyone's running these days, like the just the standard cards, like with the Timberwolves and is that right, Timberwolves? The 2/2 that gives the
Yeah.
adjacent minions
Oh
plus
no,
one.
Timberwolf is the 1/1. I think
Direwolf,
it's
sorry,
Direwolf
Direwolf.
Alpha. Yeah,
I knew
that's
it sounded
2
wrong.
mana. Yeah.
I knew that sounded wrong. Anyway, the Direwolf and has like the Doom guards. That deck is so rampant right now, and it's pretty funny because with all the super fast aggro decks out there, like that's become like mid range basically.
Yeah.
Like so you're playing the control, against all the super fast hyper aggro decks, and you're playing the aggro against the more control decks, but a lot of times with that deck, you're controlling the board and then getting damage in when you can. You're not just going blindly for face. So there's a little bit more, skill in that.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. So anything to talk about with aggro versus aggro, Alchemixt?
I mean, I don't really know if I can like say anything like specifically. It's just I think you just need to make better decisions, know what to know when you should be killing one of their creatures, know when you should be making them trade with yours. I think that's a big thing that a lot of players kind of struggle with is like,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I'm going to kill this off, but next turn they were probably going to make that trade anyways. So like noticing those kind of like when you should be attacking, like when you should be the aggressor and when you should be the one clearing the board, I think is like the biggest thing in the aggressive mirrors.
I think another thing to really pay attention to too is card tracking in aggro versus aggro, and I mean that goes for nearly any game, but especially in aggro mirrors because you want to think like, all right, he's got this card out. The way he's playing, it's a little bit odd that he didn't play a creature there. I bet that means he's got this removal card in his hand. So maybe this turn I do need to trade because next turn he's going to be able to kill my minion with a card from his hand and retain board control that way as well too. So I feel like you really need to be careful about knowing what they probably have in their hand, what they're capable of casting, and then letting that affect how you trade on the board as well too. That's
Definitely.
Yeah. So let's see. Actually, you know what my favorite mirror is right now? Is actually Murloc versus Murloc. That is a crazy mirror. It's like I had one game where I played my Murloc Tidecaller. It's the 1/2 that gets a +1 attack whenever a Murloc comes into play. And then the guy on the other side coined and put out 2 of them. And so we had like 3 on the board. Mine was a 3/2. He had like 1/2/2 and 1/1/2. And then I had like Murlocs in my hand, and I was like, what the hell do I do now? Like, it's okay. So if I play this, then he gets this buff, but this guy that gets this many buffs, and like, do I Soulfire? But that is like the craziest matchup, man. Like, if you want your brain to just hurt, play Murloc versus Murloc. But it's fun though. I know it's I enjoy it because it makes you make really bizarre decisions that you wouldn't make otherwise. And if you win something like that, if you win Murloc versus Murloc, you feel so good because you're like, wow, I can't believe I actually survived that. But that's.
You just wait for your chance to get old Murkai out there, and you're like, well, now he has 15 attack.
Oh, he's so big. Like, and here's something about old Murkai. I actually lately I've been enjoying in aggro versus aggro. I've been really enjoying playing him on an empty board, or playing him when I don't necessarily even have any Murlocs out there, because I feel like in certain situations he can be pretty strong board control as well too, because it's not a battle cry as far as his plus attack goes. You can play Murlocs later on other turns and he'll still get that buff. So if you can play him at a certain time, charge and use him to take out a smaller minion and still retain him as like a 2/3 or something like that, or even a 2/2 sometimes, then he can come back and be even stronger next turn. And he also kind of draws a lot of attention over. So at first I was like, I'll never play old Murkai unless I have Murlocs out. But now I'm like starting to play him on an empty board now, just because he is at 2/4. He's like kind of like a super powered Keeper of the Grove for Murloc sometimes.
Yeah, you can manipulate like the old Frostwolf Warlord.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really weird, but that's kind of what aggro versus aggro does. You know, it makes you make weird decisions too. And here's something I want to talk about. Do you guys play a lot of Murloc? I just started recently. I hated it before that, and then like Artosis got me into playing Murloc, and now
With
I've
his
been playing
12-hour
Murloc
cast.
straight for like the last 2 weeks. Yeah, nothing but Murloc. But do you guys play a lot of Murloc? What's your Murloc experience? Let's talk about
I do not. Alchemist, go ahead.
it.
I've played it a fair amount, but I've recently, well, not really recently, but I played it for a while, and then I ended up switching to the non Murloc aggro deck.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I kind of see like you people. It's easy to just rage, but it's kind of easy to see like how there could be a certain level of skill involved because you have to
Yeah.
figure out when to play them and everything. Then obviously when you play it against a lot, you have to memorize, which cards do what could they possibly put out there. So I mean that's the extent of my experience with it. It's just like I need to memorize those cards, or else
Well,
I'll be screwed if they put a war leader down. I didn't know that was coming.
I used to really, the reason I used to really dislike Murloc is because it felt very random to me. You know, it felt very coin flippy. And, it felt like, well, I just didn't get the draw, so I lose. You know, but it felt like an extreme version of like playing other aggro decks where you can kind of blame it on the draw, if you have a bad game. And what I figured out was that you need to be so careful when you're mulliganing Murloc. Like the mulligan is actually the most important part of the game, I think, for that particular type of deck, because it's not just, you may want to throw back a Flame Imp if you have something else in your hand, especially if you're going turn one. You may want to hunt extra hard for that, for the Murloc Tidecaller or something like that. So what I found out, and what has really probably given me the most success with Murloc, is just really, really changing how I mulligan that deck, and really aggressively mulliganing for some of the stuff that people just either ignore wrongly or can't deal with early on. Like I'm liking Voidwalkers less and less in my opening hand the more I play this, because they just don't do a whole lot for you.
Yeah, I find the biggest difference between like a good Murloc player and someone who is like average or a little worse is like just knowing like what turn you should be life tapping,
Yeah.
like against the slower decks, knowing like you don't always just want to like throw out a Murloc each turn, because if you just throw out like one or two Murloc, they're just going to kill it and kill. Like sometimes you want to like hold them back and then
Oh yeah,
have just
absolutely.
a big turn type deal. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, because they have that misconception like, oh, it's just face roll, mash my keyboard, just throw out whatever. But it's really not like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
some cases they feel like that, but it's not always like that.
right. I mean, sometimes you just get like the God hand, right? And then you can just like, all right, I know exactly what order to play things, and it's all very apparent and all that. But one thing with Murloc is that when you get the coin, for instance, you definitely don't always want to just coin out things right away. Probably one of the best plays, I think, one of the best openings you can do in Murloc with the coin is go Murloc Tidecaller turn one, save the coin, and then turn two, throw out either a turn two Murloc War Leader or Cold Light Seer, right? Because you're going to get that buff and you're going to get that extra health, and then that becomes very difficult for them to deal with going into like their turn three, basically. So,
Yeah, I've played against like Murlocs where they just throw out a ton of Murlocs in turn 6,
yeah,
like
that's
all
it.
at once, and it's hard to deal with if you don't have AoE.
Mm-hmm.
Like think of it if you have. I'm just thinking in my head right now. Like, what if you just wait to turn 9 and you throw out 2 War Leaders and the Cold Light Seer, and now like what is that? That would be a 5/6, a 5/6, and what's the third one going to be? It would be a 6/5. Is that right? Yeah, 5/6, 5/6, 6/5. That's a massive turn 9. If you
Yeah.
think about it, even if you're just like in the middle of like a random game, but that's just like 3 cards right there.
It's almost like a slightly weaker version of Handlock or something like that. I'd be worried you take so much damage that you wish you had the Giants, But
Yeah, but I mean, like
that's
it
interesting.
shows the power of like just being patient.
Yeah, I think with Murloc a lot of times, unless you have some sort of really strong combo going, you won't really want to put more than like 3 guys out on the board at a time, especially if you're playing against like a Druid or, Paladin or something like that. You need to be very aware of the possibility of the AoE coming in. You have to kind of play around with it. And sometimes you just kind of have to go for it and hope they don't have it. But especially with Druid, especially a Druid with the coin who saves it past turn 2, you can kind of assume that they've got that turn 3 coin into swipe in their hand. And so you need to be like very aware of that and put down maybe like one Murloc that is very tempting to kill, or something like that, like a bluegill warrior that just did 2 damage, along with like a tide caller, and then they're like, oh, I feel like I need to do this right away, otherwise I'm going to take 4+ whatever he's playing next turn, and then you save your hand, and then you drop 3 the next turn. So you do need to kind of play around it a bit, but not overly cautiously. But yeah, usually like 3 out on the board is about the max you want to have, unless you feel that you have a very strong tempo. Seems like, but I apologize to everyone for talking about Murlocs for so long. I don't know. It's just really fun right now. But
Hey, it was the number one deck on both EU and NA.
it was. Yeah. When was it? That was only like 2 weeks ago or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, what was it? Puffins on NA.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about EU, but I just heard that someone wrote that. And
I have a really short, funny story. There's a guy on my friends list named Ruben Zoo. He was playing in a an ESL tournament. I was watching him stream, and he got paired up against Puffins round 2, and Puffins played not Murlocs game 1, and he lost. And then so he assumed that he was going to play Murlocs, and he had 2 Hungry Crabs in his Warlock deck, and he's just like Hungry Crabbed him on turn 3, and he conceded. So if you play Murlocs and you're known for playing Murlocs, and you play in a tournament, be prepared to get Hungry Crab.
Sideboard into those Hungry Crabs, man. That's hilarious.
I almost thought about playing Hungry Crab against Razor in the King of the Hill because he played Murlocs twice.
That's not a bad idea, man. I mean, if they have it, it's a pretty cheap way to get a huge minion and really screw them over, yeah.
But then when do you use the Hungry Crab? Do you wait for the War Leader?
I'd use that on anything, pretty much. Yeah,
I mean,
I was joking, but yeah.
Early on, yeah, that'll screw you off, yeah. Or screw you up quite a bit, yeah. All right, well, let's see. Moving on from Murlocs, we have to talk about something else now. Let's see. Where were we before we got caught up on all that? Actually, this is a good time, I think, to transition into a slightly different topic. All still dealing with laddering, but Dtwo, you actually made a graph recently, kind of showing at what win rate percentage. If you're at X win rate, how many games will it take you to get to Legendary, assuming that you hold that win rate, throughout your laddering from 25 to Legendary? And we can put that up on the screen now, but do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, like when we heard about the topic, we decided we'd do some research, and I came up with this table. I basically did all the math to figure out the expected value. In other words, how many stars will you get, assuming that you're not currently on a win streak, and assuming that win streaks are available. Like you can get the 2 stars for 3 wins in a row. And so if you look, I just started from 40%. It seemed like a good place to start. For example, 50%. If you're winning a 50% rate over 10 games, you're expected to get 1 star. And if you have 100% over those 10 games, you get 18 stars.
Yeah.
Because the first 2 are 1 and the next 8 are 2. But it's interesting if you just look at it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can come up with, but I think the most striking thing to me was that at that 1 star per 10 game rate, if you're at a 50% win rate, it takes 695 games to go from rank 25 to 5, which is a ridiculous amount. And even just bumping your rate up 5%, you get the 2.3 stars. That means that it takes only 299 games to go from 25 to 5. So you save yourself 400 games basically, just barely raising your win rate. So I mean, if you're a middling player, and you're not, you're decent but not, you're okay. Then you're definitely rather go for the higher win percentage than to go for the faster games.
Right.
Which is one of the things, I mean, I assume we're going to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great transition into that kind of thing, is that people have to kind of make that decision of, do I play the control deck that's going to take longer? And then if I lose, I'm like, oh no, I've spent, 15 minutes on this one game and I lost a star for it. That's horribly inefficient. Or do you go for a lot of quick games where you can play maybe 2 in that time, and then, you win 1 and lose 1 and you're about the same, or you win 2 and you make it farther ahead? I want to talk about the graph just a little bit more, but then, yeah, I think we should definitely talk about control versus aggro in terms of efficient laddering. But I think the crazy thing to kind of see with this graph is that it takes, in a lot of cases, at most percentages, almost as many, or at least around like 2/3 as many wins to get from 5 to legendary as it does to get from 25 to 5. And a lot of that is because of win rates, or not win rates, but because of win streaks, where you get 2 stars, which of course ends at rank 5. Um, but the other thing to consider is that once you hit rank 5, you're going to be hitting people in Legend, actually. They play,
Yeah.
I've seen people in Legend hit anyone up to like rank 8, I think is the highest I've seen a Legend player
I
hit.
I'm not
But,
sure about that, but I know like you consistently go against rank 5 players. So
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, so if you start from rank 25 and you win every single game, it takes 61 games to get to legendary.
Hmm.
And you can kind of see it in the graph. Like I kind of finagle the numbers from 25 to 5 to like because obviously it doesn't take into consideration if you're looking at the stars for 10 games, like if you're currently on a winning streak. So if you're like taking a huge sample of games rather than just 10. So I finagle the numbers, they're pretty close. But yeah, if you look, I mean, if you're a really good player and you're winning a lot of your games, it doesn't take that long to get from 25 to 5 because of the win streak.
Yeah. But then after that, it's like it takes quite a bit, and then it's tougher to maintain that win rate. And then
Yeah,
even
exactly.
if you do, yeah, it's still going to be longer. So it's
But yeah, one thing I was gonna say that kind of like
mhm.
ties into what I'm supposed our transition is that if you're like at a higher win rate, it kind of makes a little bit of sense to maybe go with a faster deck because now you're only it only takes like 7, 8, 9 games more to achieve where you're trying to get to, which is rank 5.
Mhm.
And at that rate, if like the games are taking significantly longer with like a slower deck, then it's pretty much worth it. But if you're like at the 50, 55, 60% win rate, definitely not worth it. You just want to win.
Mm. Just want to play something a little bit slower, something maybe that guarantees it a little bit more. So I guess that kind of brings us to that next topic, control versus aggro, as far as like what to play on the ladder to move up the fastest. And I think obviously part of this is preference. Part of this is like what players feel comfortable playing with. But if you're maybe, let's say, if you're a newer player, if you're kind of newer to Hearthstone, newer to CCGs, what do you guys think would be better to go for a newer player, aggro or control? And I'll ask Alchemixt first because you haven't talked for a little while. So, what do you think?
Um, I think if you're a newer player and you just, well, I guess it depends how new, but I think for newer players, aggro decks are going to be easier to win with because you're more likely to get those free wins.
Hmm.
But I feel like if you want to really learn the game and like just improve and get to like that next level, the control decks are what kind of bring you there because I feel like there's a like when you're playing against aggressive decks, it's on you to make the right make most of the right calls. Like you need to have the right cards. You need to decide like do I kill this card? Do I wait to see if he like plays more creatures into my AOE, things like
Hmm.
that. But what I like to do is actually, which is kind of like a little trick. Well, it's not really a trick, but it's what I like to do. I'll play like Hunter or Warlock until I get 2 games win in a row. So I'll play the really fast deck until I get on a win streak,
Mm,
and then
okay.
I'll switch to my Warrior control deck because even though the games are going to last twice as long, they're worth 2 stars, so it's worth it if you win. And then
Mm.
if I lose, I just go back to my Hunter or my Warlock for a couple games until I get that 2 in a row.
It's a really good idea. Actually, I'm
Yep.
going
So
to
you
start doing
just
that.
yeah, you save a lot of time
Yeah, that's really smart. Wow.
because it sucks when you play Warrior control, you go to fatigue and then you lose.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess that sucks. That always sucks,
Well,
but it's
that
just
that does always suck, but it sucks
time
even
wasting.
more if you can't even get the win streak going. Yeah. All right. Interesting. So, what do you think, D2? Do you kind of echo that, or do you have a little bit of a different philosophy on like what's good for the new player to try to move up the ladder if that's what they really want to do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like for new players, I mean, I think like I would say aggro is a little bit easier for the newer player.
Mm.
So I mean, basically go with that. But if the newer player is, I don't know, maybe he's experienced in different games and he likes having control, then go with that. But I think in general, just go with like the aggro.
Hmm.
That'll give you a better chance to win the first place, and then it's faster also. So
Hmm. And I agree. I totally agree. And I mean, playing aggro, at least it will teach you the basic mechanics of minion trading, things like that. It'll help you learn a little bit about mulligans and stuff. But And I think a lot of people get discouraged, especially at the start of a new season, if they don't have all the cards in the game. If they don't have all the legendaries and all that, they feel like, oh great, what am I going to do? And actually today, one of my friends, she just started playing Hearthstone like 2 days ago. She spent like $20 on packs, so has never played Arena. So has basically just brand new player, never played CCGs or anything like that. And so I was playing some games with her today, and kind of sitting behind her as she laddered. And she started out at 25, 1 star like everybody does. And basically we went in and we made just a very basic bare bones, rogue deck using some of the good basic neutrals and some of the good basic rogue spells and all that, and just kind of guiding her through the decisions each turn, and making good trades, making good mulligans, good calls with stuff. We were able to get on a win streak and get all the way up to like 20 without losing a single game. In fact, that's where we stopped for the day because we had to split up. So I think it's important to note too that if you really kind of slow down your play and concentrate on making those good decisions, you don't need to have all these like super ladder decks too that everybody talks about, that you see on Reddit and all that stuff too. You can just kind of focus on those good decisions, and you can take a deck pretty far, I think, on the ladder, actually. I mean, Trump hit Legendary with a free-to-play deck, too, so as long as your decision-making is good, you don't necessarily need all those cards.
That's a little bit deceptive, I would say. I
don't think you can't use Trump as quite the, model example, but I think it's reasonable. Well, tell me if you agree with this. I feel like it's reasonable for somebody who doesn't have very many of the Expert set cards. I think you could expect to get up to like maybe rank 10 without too much trouble if you make good decisions.
I think if you're good, you can definitely get to Legendary with just normal cards, just like Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, like...
But an average, like, newer player,
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you look at my graphic end, like, if you just have a 55% win rate, I mean, it'll take you 250 games to go from 5 to Legendary.
Yeah.
And, what was that, 550 overall. So all you have to do is be, like, slightly better than average.
Yeah.
Which I think was actually the case with Trump. If you were looking at... I was watching his stream a lot.
Of games.
Yeah, he was playing, like... He was stuck at, like, rank 1 for, like, I think, like, 30 hours.
Holy crap.
Because if I remember correctly, because I was watching his stream for a while and he was like stuck there for a while. But yeah, I mean it was just basically, I mean, Trump. I think most people would agree he's like one of the better players, and then I think he was just outplaying his opponents rather than anything else. And so like he's just using his good plays to like barely maintain that over 50 win percentage that eventually got him there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, too, is that make no mistake, getting to Legendary is a grind. You need to be able to play a lot of games to make it, even if you are a very good player. I mean, looking at, I would say a lot of good players would maintain, on average, what do you think, like around a 70 to 75% win rate? That still seems a little bit high. But as far as like what to expect, so let's even say 65. So even if you maintain a 65% win rate, which is extremely good, you'd have to be an extremely good player to hit that. That's still over 200 games, which is going to take anybody who you can expect probably has a job, probably has other things to do during the day. They're not going to be able to play all day long. It's still going to be a grind. It's still going to take a long time.
Actually, Alchemixt, how many games did it take you to? Because Alchemixt went on the Smurf account and got to Legendary in 10 hours.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well.
And then how long? Like, how many games was that? I think you counted into.
I don't have the exact number, but before I say this, I will say that this was at the very end of the month, and I do think it's way more reasonable to do what I did then, as opposed to I think it would be almost impossible to do it in 10 hours at the very reset of a season. But I started at 0 wins, and I had 94 wins by the time I hit Legendary. So I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing around 150, give or take.
Okay.
And I was playing the Warlock aggro deck the whole time, which was like how I was managed to get that many games in that short a time. Because especially from rank 25 to 5, I lost I think like a total of 2 games. So I had to win streak the entire time, and like the games were lasting. Some games like I'd get to turn 4 and I just have a good board position and like the opponent would concede, or like sometimes you just like you kill them on turn 6 or something like that. But
it's the beauty of Murloc.
Yeah. This was the not Murloc one.
Oh, beauty of Warlock. I meant to say.
Oh
Yeah, I
yeah.
made the mistake of trying to challenge that 10-hour mark at the beginning of season 4, and like I was in the teens at by the end of like hour 8, like, huh, it's not
Yeah,
Yeah.
gonna
it's like
work.
impossible to
The
do
ladder's
it.
a lot harder right now because you've got all the pretty good players moving up at the same time. So yeah, it's definitely a big difference. But so if you said it took about 150 games, that would be between a 65 and 70% win rate if we go by D2's graph here too. So again, like a very very good player, and I would consider you a very very good player. Obviously, that's about what you can expect. So that's interesting that that lines up kind of with that graph. That's cool. But
Well, he probably went, 90%
well, it's like a
for the
huge win
first
rate.
part.
Then yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
yeah, but that's how it is for like, I mean, you can go up to like rank. I don't know if you sit down for like 3-4 hours, maybe not even that long, and you're a good player, you'll be able to go up to like at least rank like 7 to 5 ish in your first day of playing, and then it's all from there that you have to spend all your time.
I'm actually I'm looking at the deck that I used right now because I still play the deck, but
Hmm.
just going to like legend, like talking about the legendaries and cheaper decks.
Hmm.
The only card in here that's legendary that I think is an absolute must is, well, not even really, is Leroy. So I think this
Mm.
deck, like I play Blood Mage Thalnos and Tankmaster, but I don't think those are necessary.
Yeah.
So like deck is actually super cheap. Like there's no epics. There's only one legendary that I think you need, and all the rest are basics or
Hmm.
are rares really. So I think someone would, if they wanted to make like a Warlock aggro deck like this,
Hmm.
um, they could easily make like a budget version and do very well.
Well, that I think kind of brings us to sort of the last thing I wanted to talk about tonight, which is to just go through and say, all right, put it out there. Like, what do you think is the best deck right now to use to grind wins on the ladder? So I guess we'll start with you, Alchemix. Would you go with that Warlock deck then? As far as like, if you had to pick one deck to play for the rest of until you get to Legendary, what would it be?
If I had to pick one deck, I'd probably pick Warlock aggro. I think there are a lot of reasonable decks, but I think the biggest strength of Warlock is they don't know if you're Murlocs, they don't know if you're aggro non-Murlocs, they don't know if you're Giants,
Hmm.
and they also like, do you play Doom Guards? Do you not like? It's the deck that like it makes it hard for your opponent to mulligan correctly and
Yeah.
play the first few turns right. So I think Warlock gets a huge advantage from that. So I would pick a Warlock deck.
Okay. Okay, D2. What do you think?
Me personally, I mean, I would probably go with either my Shaman or my Druid deck because like they both have like they can both control the board in the beginning and like kind of they have enough defense against the aggro decks, and then they can burst down some of the more control decks that it has like unfavorable matchups against.
All right.
Um, I mean that's just me. Like if I was like coaching a new player, I'd probably tell them pick Hunter, go for the face, and kill really quick, or um. But yeah, I think your biggest like whatever you pick, you basically have to know that you're good against aggro because there's going to be so many people trying to get those like easy wins, easy
Mhm.
cheap wins in the ladder. So you need to
Yeah.
have that matchup down. And if you start running into a lot of control, then you just have to find a way to deal with it. And just and then on the other hand, like always have some sort of way to beat the control, but like you want to have a well-rounded deck, but maybe more rounded toward the stopping aggro.
Yeah. I feel like your best way to beat a control deck with aggro is just to mulligan into something good. To really search for stuff is going to give them a hard time and going to set them way behind. Um, and I think, for me too, I'm going to agree with Alchemix on the Warlock deck, the kind of, I guess you call mid-rangey sort of aggro Warlock deck right now, because it's like you brought up all the good points, I think, about it, is that I really don't have anything new to add to it, where it's inexpensive, relatively easy to play, and it's deceptive too, because there's kind of those three big Warlock decks on the ladder right now: Murloc, Aggro, and Handlock. So it's hard for people to mulligan against you. So yeah, I would agree with that one. I think that's probably the most consistent out there as far as like win grinding too. But if you're very comfortable with playing a control style and you can slow down and make right decisions, Druid, Shaman, Control Warrior, all good choices as well too. But that's kind of the cool thing about the game, I think, right now, is that there's a lot of good viable options to move up with.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, like for your sanity's sake, like you just need to play what you enjoy.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
like you don't like, for instance, I can play Druid relatively well, and I can go up the ladder with it, but I don't like playing it. I don't enjoy it. It's boring to me. So I'd rather like not wait, like, because then if you lose, you're gonna be frustrated because you didn't even want to play that deck to begin with. If you win, you
Yeah.
don't even care because you're like, I just didn't want to play that deck. So like when it comes down to it, like you should just play like the one that you have the most fun with, really.
That's exactly what happened to me. I started using your that warlock deck that you used to get to legendary on your Smurf account, and I just didn't enjoy it. I was like, I gotta change. So
Yep.
that's basically why I switched back to Psalm and Tusk Druid.
I had a similar thing with Druid, where I was playing a Druid deck that Savitz was playing quite a bit from Doge House, and it would seem very good, but it just wasn't that much fun to play for me. So I had to go back to Control Warrior and Warlock again, kind of my two favorites, pretty much since the early beta. So neat. Well, yeah, I think that was a really cool episode. Actually, I really had a lot of fun with that. I think it's a good basis to start from for a lot of people who are just jumping into the ladder here. And then we're only about a week in. Yeah, a week in. So it's still pretty new. So I guess that being the case, it is time for some shout outs. Alchemixt, go ahead.
All right. Well, first I want to shout out our partners at Don't Kick My Robot. We write articles for BlizzPro, iHeartU, and Hearthstone players. Also, if you want to see any of the decks that we were talking about, you can find all of our decks on don'tkickmyrobot.com. And also, we are going to have a match versus Clarity Gaming in a week. I think Dtwo can confirm.
16th,
Yeah. Yeah. And lastly, shout out to my teammate Sexy Stutter because he asked for one.
Awesome. Dtwo, you're up.
Mainly the same shadows, definitely to our partners, Hearthstone players, Bliss Pro, iHeartU, where we have the meta report. Check that out too. Go to Don't Kick My Robot for a lot of stuff that you wouldn't maybe expect to find on the team website, like budget decks, etc. All our articles are there too. I think I wrote some of these down. Oh, yeah. So follow the team Twitter at Don't Kick My Robot or at Don't Kick My Robot. Follow me at DKMR_D2 and twitch.tv/IMD2. It's 3 letters and a number. Go follow Alchemixt too, and yeah, and shout out to Alchemixt, who I'm rooting for this coming King of the Hill.
Nice.
And yeah, that's
Thanks.
should be it. Are we figuring something?
I don't think so. I wouldn't know, but
All
sounded good to me.
right, cool.
Sounds
All
good.
right. Well, I will shout out to Simon Simpatico Abital for running everything behind the scenes. You know, always there, and we need him to edit the great King of the Hill stuff, to take care of Turn2, make everything look nice on iHeartU.com, which you guys should go to and hang out on the forums. Check out the meta report from Don't Kick My Robot, and you can find all the VODs for the King of the Hills and lots of other cool articles there as well. And of course, you know, follow my stuff on Twitter at GGDoa. And I think that's about it for this week's show. So, yeah, cool stuff. Thanks to you guys very much for joining us today. And that's about it. So we'll see you on the next cast. And I think we're going to have the King of the Hill right after that. If not, you can find it on YouTube very soon afterwards. So that is about it. See you next time.